YouTube? Captain Mac here, and what we are about to conquer is the bulk of the pre-flight checks, including the captain's originating checks or captain's originating flows, depending on which term you want to use, and same for the first officer and so on, for the Majestic -8 Q400. So a couple things before we get started that I want to talk about. What brought us to this point? It's kind of a little wild here. Is a few of you have asked for me to take a break from my current flight series in the CRJ, which, being that Aerosoft did not come out or did not release the CRJ that they've been planning to release, we've been stuck in the default FSX CRJ. And basically, a couple of you went on there and said, listen, no offense, I'm sick of looking at that thing, and I don't blame you. Can you do some different flights in some different aircraft? And specifically, can you do some flights in the Majestic -8? Well, the Pro version of the Majestic -8 just came out here recently, and I picked it up immediately, and I thought, wow, that's perfect. That sounds fantastic. So, yesterday I did my first flight in it that was intended to be for you guys. And since the nature of my flights is entertainment but also tutorial, I went through all the captain's originating checks, all of the first flight of the day checks, all of the first officer's originating checks, the whole shebang. And the video was 3 hours long. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Now, I know my videos are already long. It was 3 hours long. Needless to say, that's not even going to make it onto the channel. It's just not going to happen. And I'll talk about that in my next episode of The Life of a Virtual Airline Pilot, the decision I made there. So, what I've decided to do is, for all future flights in the Majestic -8 Q400, I will be starting the flight rather than from a cold and dark cockpit. I will have done all of my captains and first officers originating checks, with the exception of setting up the FMS, and then it'll basically be set up the FMS, a couple little cleanup things, start the aircraft, and go. And that will help to keep the video short. But in order to do that, obviously, you guys need the information on, because those checks are important. They're not just important in the real world. For this particular aircraft, they are important. Okay, because if you want to get this thing up and running properly, you got to go through those flows. So it only makes sense that we do essentially what amounts to a cold and dark tutorial here, which is what I'm going to title this video. And we go through all of those flows all the way up to the point just shy of come on, brain, work. Just shy of setting up the FMS and actually starting the engine. So that's what we're going to do today. We are going to get everything set up, but we're not going to start the engines. We're not going to actually put a flight plan into the FMS. I hope that makes sense to everybody. So in order to do that, we need two things. We need our Majestic -8 Q400 control panel, and I'm going to call it the -8 and the Q400 interchangeably. I don't really care which one you hate more, because some people hate hearing it called the -8, some people hate hearing it called the Q400. It's actually both. That's what it is. So it doesn't really matter which one you call it. And if you disagree, that's okay. That's your right. But that's what I'm going to go with. So I'll call it either one interchangeably. Please just bear with me and don't tear me up the comments too much. You need the control panel for this. This is our control panel right here. And in order to put the information, now we're over here on weight and balance. This is what we're here for. In order to put this information, the information we need in here, we need a flight plan. Bam, look at that, got a flight plan. Boom, that just happened right there. Okay, so we have a flight plan here. This is actually the next flight that I'm going to be performing for the Life of a Virtual Airline Pilot series. So I figured, hey, let's go ahead and do this cold and dark tutorial here, and then I'll just roll right into doing the video for that flight. See, pretty industrious of me, right? So there's some key information that we need here. We need the total number of packs, the total number of cargo, and then we need our takeoff fuel and our trip fuel. Once we've got all that information in there, we'll hit calculate, and it's going to give us some numbers over here. Now, for ACARS, which I've got set up over here, because like I said, this is the next flight we're going to be doing in Life of a Virtual Airline Pilot. ACARS has a load of 66 packs, and you can see on here that our flight plan has a load of 74. That's okay. I'm going to go with this for filling out the information on the control panel, because then I know I'm going to have enough fuel to take care of business, right? Okay, so let's start with, oh, by the way, everything's in kilograms on this. I originally changed the control panel to pounds, which you can do by going over here to flight config, and you just switch that to pounds, hit apply, and then you have to shut down and restart FSX. When it says reload the aircraft, it's not enough just to reload it to a different airport. I tried that. But the reason I switched back to kilograms is the template that I have for the Majestic Dash 8 in PFPX, which I use for my flight planning, only gives you kilograms. So it spits it out in kilograms, even though I have it set to pounds over there. So we're going with kilograms. So our forward and aft baggage, we've got a total cargo, this is our baggage here, of 759 kilograms. So really what we want to do is we want to split that. Clearly the aft baggage is a larger area than the forward baggage, but because we have a pretty full load, we don't really want to overdo it in the back. So it seems to me that we should probably put say 400 in the back and 359 in the front, and let's just see how that works. So 400 aft, 359 front. For those of you who are slower than me at math, which that would be a feat in itself, that equals 759 kilograms. Now let's talk about passengers. We need to come up with 74 passengers. This is where we enter the number of the passengers in this little dark outline box, and to the right of it is the max number of passengers for that section. These letters correspond to the letters of each section up here. So OA can hold 18. So let's just start out. Let's just max them out. 18, 20, and I know it's more than 74. I'm just doing this for simplicity. 24, and then 14 is going to take us to 76. So we're only over by 2. Considering that we've already got a little more cargo in the back end here, what do you say we take them out of section Oscar Delta so that we relieve a little bit of that weight back there? So let's just put 12 there. Okay. Now we've got 74 total packs, which is what we have on our flight plan. Now let's take care of our fuel. Our takeoff fuel is the first one we enter here, but trip fuel is first over here. So it's just something you want to pay attention to. Make sure when you look at your fuel information on your flight plan that you're entering the right information over here. So our minimum takeoff fuel is 2713. So we'll put that in here, 2713. And our trip fuel, this is our how much fuel we should burn on the flight, is 1828. So let's put that in there. Now, here's the deal. We're going to hit calculate. We're going to see some lines show up here and some little boxes. And as long as everything falls within the flight envelope, we're good to go. Let's find out. It did not. Not even close. Look at this. All these red numbers mean everything is outside of the flight envelope. Let's see. We're not over our max zero fuel weight. We're not over our takeoff max. And we're not over our landing max. So we're under all our weights, which tells us that there's a problem with the weight and balance of the cargo. Okay. The further it is this way, the further to the rear of the aircraft it is. So my guess is it has to do with that. So let's try something here. And this, you know, I'm not a Q400 pilot in the real world, so I don't even know if you could do this. But let's just put 700 kilograms all the way up in the forward baggage, because my guess is everything is too far aft. All the weight is too far back, and that's a dangerous situation. And we're still gonna get a we're still getting a no-go there, huh? What is going on with this thing? So give me just a second here, because I don't want to drag this on forever. I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to see if I can figure out where I messed up the numbers, get this squared away, and then we'll hop back in here and we'll continue on. Alright, so in order to make everything work, I had to actually lower the number of passengers. Initially I just took out all the baggage, but that didn't cut it either. So we brought it down to 68 passengers. Actually, the weight's pretty far forward. Excuse me. These boxes here represent where the different weights are falling within the aircraft. I don't want to talk about this too long, so I just want to try something here real quick. If we go 500 here and 259 here, then you'll see what happens. Okay, watch when I hit calculate, these boxes will shift back, even if only a little. There you go. So now our center of gravity is a little closer to the center of the flight envelope, and that's where I like it. So we're going to go with that. And then once we've done all this, we've got all our fuel and stuff entered. If we hit send data to flight sim, it's actually going to enter this fuel information into the aircraft for us, so we don't have to load fuel later, and that's always helpful. So send data to flight sim. There we go. We're ready to rock and roll. I keep this up until I'm done with it because we're going to need fuel information for later on. And we're going to need our zero fuel weight for later on as well. So I usually just shrink this down and pull it up later when the information becomes necessary. Same thing for the flight plan. When I get ready to do my FMS information, I want to use this version of the flight plan, this text version of a flight plan, rather than entering every single waypoint in there. So I just put this off to the side so that I have it available later. And that leaves us with just the Q400. So the only thing left to do there, since this is done, we want to go ahead and hop into our aircraft and get going on our pre-flight checks here. Now, I will always remove this yoke pretty much right away. Maybe, if it'll let me. Is there a reason it's not letting me? That's interesting. Oh, I know why. The aircraft was paused. It does that for. I think it's automatically pausing when I load it in. Or no, you know what? I paused it so the time wouldn't tick down too far, since I'm actually going to do the flight when I'm done here. Okay, so let's go into the first thing we need to do is we need to actually power up the aircraft, and everything in here is all about a flow, a direction of flows. The initial powering up of the aircraft is actually really simple, and we'll just hop up to the overhead panel here, and what we need to do, well, my apologies. Before we do the overhead panel, we need to check circuit breakers. Now, this is something in sims where we always go, okay, well, yeah, circuit breakers, whatever. We don't check them because they're not simulated. Well, prepare yourselves, because they are simulated in the Dash 8 Pro Edition, right? So all of these circuit breakers are simulated. And if I click on any one of them, a little pop-up comes out, and I can actually pop them up and out. So if you watch this circuit breaker right here, when I pop it out, you can see it's popped out now. You see the little white line there, right? I can't pop it back on from here. I kind of dislike that. I wish they'd integrated it right into this panel. But either way, it's still, that's pretty cool to me. So you do need to check the circuit breakers. Now, you don't have to pop up that little window unless you need to do something with a circuit breaker. So you check all of these, make sure none of them are popped out, and you would know they were popped out by that little white line. And we got to check all the circuit breakers on the first officer's side. So we float across magically through the aircraft, and we check these circuit breakers over here as well. So if you have the Pro Edition, you need to check your circuit breakers. Now, that being said, in the Pilot Edition, the circuit breakers may not work, but it doesn't. But basically, everything else is going to be the same in the aircraft. But I would just get in the habit of doing it because that's the right way to do it anyway. Okay, yappity yap long enough, right? We need to make sure our gear lever's down. It is. That's good since we're on the ground. Make sure the radar is off. Let me hop over here. The radar is actually down here. This is the radar. All the way to the left is off. And you can scoot over this way and see the little white tick mark there that shows that it's off. And then now we're going to actually put power on the aircraft. So the way we want to do this is we're going to turn on the battery master, the main battery, the auxiliary battery, and the standby battery. And you must do it in that order. So it's from right to left, battery master, main, auxiliary, standby. And then when you shut down, you must do it from left to right. It specifically says that in the manual here. So battery master, main battery, auxiliary battery, standby battery. And now we've got some power on the aircraft. Pretty straightforward. Now the main bus tie goes on. That's this one in the middle here. Main bus tie is on. Position lights go on. This is to let them know we've got power on the aircraft. And then we can turn on our flight deck displays at this point. All of these flight deck displays are turned on by these four knobs down here. You get 1, 2, 3, 4. And they're actually all on already. If they were off, they would stay black. But they're
bank angle.
Oh yeah, bank angle. Give them a second, they're just powering up, but you can see, there they go, now they're popping on. So if they were off, they would just stay like that after that little T went away. And all you would do is rotate these knobs, turn them on, just like I did right here. Simple enough. Standby PTU pumps, we need to check and make sure that they are off. And the same can be said for the standby hydraulic pumps, okay? And that's these two right here. Now, normally when they're on, there's a light on them, right? But sometimes when you go to check those, it says here that if there's no power on the aircraft, you won't be able to see anything. Since we just powered up the aircraft, we should be good. So you should see a light on there. But you've also got the little cockpit tooltips if you have it turned on, which I usually leave it turned on for you guys. You can just hold it over there and it tells me the switch is off. So we're good on that. Emergency brake needs to be in park, which it is right here. Now we have the external power or the APU. The ground power unit for the Q400 can be called up using the data page on the FMS and then selecting services. Alright, once it's established, we can turn the batteries off to protect them from GPU surges, or we can just use the APU. For simplicity, I'm going to use the APU. If at some point there's a way to actually coordinate the APU and the GPU, so you're using some power from one and that bleeds from the other or something. And I'm not going to get into that right now because these things take long enough as it is, right? So I'm just going to go with the APU for now. I'm going to show you how to start it up. And if you're interested in seeing the use of the GPU, let me know in the comments and I will make it a point to put that in one of my videos. So as far as the APU goes, it's this little panel right here. You're going to hit the power on. You're going to see a bunch of lights blink across there. That's the self-checks that the APU is going through. There's one there, it blinks through all of them. And that's it. It's already done its self-check, so now I can hit the start button. And then there's nothing else to do except wait for it to go through whatever it's going to go through, some more self-checks. And then you'll see a little light will pop up on the gen button here. It'll be an orange or red light, amber light, whatever color you want to decide to call it. And when that pops up, we'll just press the gen button, and then we're using APU power. We leave our DC control on when we're doing that, so nothing to worry about. Alright, so click the gen button. Now it's on. We're good to go. And the last thing to do for powering up the aircraft is to initialize the FMS. That's what they call it in this aircraft, an FMS. It's a flight management system. If you call it an FMC, it's a flight management computer. Shockingly, they're the same thing. They have the same job. This is called a CDU. Technically, we're powering up the CDU, but we're going to call it the FMS because guess what? It's an FMS. So for those of you who get offended by that term, I'm not sorry. That was fun, right? Alright, so we just hit the on-off button here. I know my jokes are in poor taste. Sorry. Anyway, as these power up, it's going to go through all its self-checks. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that it says pass on all of these. Alright, so pass, and then it's going to go through this database check. And it's going to go through two of them, actually. We want to make sure, once it's gone through both of them, then we want to make sure... there we go. We got the pass, and pass. Bam. Now we want to check. There's today's date. It is correct. We want to make sure that the nav database is not out of date yet, and it actually is. But that's all right. I'll tell you what happened when I did that 3-hour-long flight. That's never going to make it on YouTube. I actually had a couple of crashes with this thing, and I had to reinstall it, and I forgot to re-update the database. So, we're going to be accepting a database that's a few months out of date. That's alright. I'm going to accept it because I'm not worried about it, and I'm certainly not going to go through and take the time to update the database and get us back to this point because it just takes too long. Alright, that is the power-up of the aircraft right there. The aircraft is fully powered up, and the next thing that we're going to go into is the captain's originating checks. Alright, so captain's originating checks then, or captain's originating flows, whatever term you want to use. Basically, the idea here is this is a flow that ultimately you want to memorize. Now, where am I getting this information? You're going to be asking yourself this. If you go to your Majestic page, your Majestic page. Go to Majestic's website and go to their resources tab and go to tutorials and get the simulated delivery and advanced tutorial flight. That's where I'm getting all of my flows from. It's got them all laid out in there and it's fantastic. Good stuff. So that's where you want to go to get this information. Eventually you want to memorize these flows as much as you can, because when we're all done with the flows, I'm going to actually go down the checklist and you're going to see that I'm just checking them off one right after another, because most of those checklist items are part of the flows. So when we're doing our life of virtual airline pilot videos and we get ready to kick things off on the flight deck here, I'm going to be going down a checklist and saying done, 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 done. And you're going to go, well, I didn't see you do any of that. That's because it was done during the flows, and I'm not doing those on camera for all of those life of virtual airline pilot videos. Everybody's tracking on that? Good. So the first thing we want to do is we want to check the landing gear alternate extension by opening the door, which is located on the floor behind the first officer's seat here. Open the door. In the pilot version, you can open the door, but these lights don't work. In the pro version, the lights work, and that's how you're supposed to check it. You flip the little switch right here, check that all 3 lights come on. They do. Turn the switch off, close the door, and we're good to go. Now we got to check the landing gear alternate release door, which is actually above the first officer right here. We want to make sure that this little switch cover is down and the door is closed, which it is. I don't really know how this thing works as far as the alternate release, but there you go. Next on the list is the escape hatch, which is right next to it. We want to make sure that this is closed. And according to whoever wrote this manual, he said in both this will come off in the sim version. In the real world and the sim version, if you take it off, it's very hard to get it back in place properly, apparently. So leave it alone. Next, we check our oxygen mask. We do that by making sure that these green bands are visible on both of these hoses behind the first officer's seat, and they are, so we're good. Demisters. This is something that I guess is peculiar about this aircraft. You must open these demisters, which are on the captain's side of the aircraft. Otherwise, you end up with foggy windows. Alright, and then we roll into our overhead panel checks. And so the way this works is there are basically four panels on here. Panel 1, you start at the top and work your way down. Panel 2 starts at the bottom, comes up, and then goes into the fire control panel. And then panel 3 is this one, and panel 4 is this one. And that's the way it flows, just like that. Alright, so that's what we're going to be doing here. And that does help you to remember it, as far as the flow is concerned. Okay. So first things first is the DC control panel. We want to make sure that all the battery switches are as required, which they are. GPU all operations are off, which they are, and APU operations all on. Now I find it interesting it says that for this right here when that stuff's over here, but while we do have external power, it says it's on, and I need to turn that off. It was in the on position by the default, so DC Gen 1 and 2 switches need to be on, these two here. And then the main bus tie is tied, which is this one here, and I can feel a sneeze coming. It's going to be a rough one. So if I sneeze in your face, my apologies. Down to the ice protection mode. Airframe mode select needs to be off. This one here, which it is. Engine intake doors need to be closed. That's these two here. They kind of jump down here. But you can see they both say closed. Reference speed switch is off, this one here, and there is a note in here that you never turn on the reference speed switch during ground operations, because if you do and you forget to turn it off, then during takeoff you can get an inadvertent stall warning. We don't want that, so leave that off. Excuse me, my nose is a little stuffed up here. Pitot static switches all off. Here's the pitot static switches, and they're all off. So when they're in the on position, they're down like that. Propeller ice protection is off. That's this one right here. And then the boot air switch is normal, which is this one here. This switch here is actually for when you do the manual ice protection. You would turn this, left click this to manual, and then you would left or right click this around, and when this lines up with any one of these dots, it tells you where it's going to be heating the surface to get rid of ice. Alright, windshield heat needs to be off, wipers need to be off, and pilot side window heat needs to be off. So heat off, wipers off, pilot side window heat. Now, the last flight I did in this, I did run into icing conditions, and the windows got all iced up. And when you turn these on, it actually takes a few minutes for that ice to go away. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Icing is fully simulated on this aircraft, by the way. Okay, rolling into panel number 2 here. Approach lights, flare lights, and taxi lights all need to be off. That's these three right here. The PFD altimeter units need to be set as required. That's this little switch right here. So even though we're using kilograms for all our weights and stuff, we're still using feet for our altimeter units. So you can switch it down to feet and meters, which if we look down here, that sets us up. This has to do with our our altimeter setting, barometric pressure, and it tells us where we are in relation to the ground. I just keep it on feet because that just sticks with the standard 29902, 3010, whatever. I think you're tracking on what I'm saying there. Let's see. Okay, onto the flight data recorder. The ELT needs to be armed. That's this right here, and it is in the armed position. So you can test it. I don't know that that does anything. Oh, the little light comes on, so we're good. It doesn't say to test it, which is kind of funny. But armed, and then the on position, you would left click and it would come down. Flight data recorder switch needs to be in the normal position, which it is. Now to the fire protection panel. There's a few things we need to do here. First, we want to make sure that these two handles right here are in. I've clicked on them before just to see, and they're in. Okay, and when they're out, there's all kinds of bells and whistles and lights going on. We want to check to make sure the handles are in, the green fuel and hydraulic lights are illuminating. That's these lights right here. Okay, and that the respective shutoff, or indicating that the respective shutoff valves are open. And then any extinguisher, armed, or bottle low lights are extinguished. Well, we don't. Here's the bottle low lights, and then which one's it? Here's the arm lights here, it looks like. So these are probably the extinguisher arm. Anyway, point being, we don't have any negative lights, and the green lights are as they should be. Please forgive me for all the sniffles. It's ridiculous. All right. So the engine 1 and 2 detection. Okay, what we're doing is we're testing the fire detection system. So we got to do engines 1 and 2, which is the little switch in the middle here. We're going to left click and hold, and then right click and hold, and we'll get a master warning, a fire bell sound, and the fault A and B illumination. You'll see all the lights light up here. So left click first. That was working, including the little lights, blinking light down here. And that was working fine as well. Next, we're going to go to the baggage aft test switch. Okay, and there's 2 smoke detectors back there, so it's basically the same test. We're looking for the same stuff. So baggage aft, you can see it says right there, baggage aft. So left click is test 1. There we go. And right click is test 2. And that means both of the baggage aft are working. And then we have the baggage forward, which is this little button here. Same thing. Press and hold, and we're good to go. And that completes all of our fire detection equipment test. So now we're going to move right down panel 3, right, which is, you get it. We're going to move down panel 3. So the first thing on panel 3 is the panel lighting. Now, let's be honest here. If we're going through all of these captain's originating checks at nighttime, and we haven't turned on our overhead console lights and our glare shield and all of that, we can't see what we're doing anyway unless we use a flashlight. Since we can't use a flashlight in the simulator, probably the first thing we would do after flipping on the DC control here is to put some lights on so we can see what we're doing. However, this is a daytime flight, so we don't need any of these lights. Let's check the APU panel comes next, which is down here. And there's really nothing for us to check except that everything is on as we expect it to be and working as we expect it to be. The engine start panel, we want to make sure that both the ignition switches are in the normal position and the select switch is centered. So these two on normal, and this switch is centered, and then this light should be out. When we get to engine starting, which we will not be doing in this tutorial, so you'll need to watch the next episode of the Life of a Virtual Airline Pilot to see how to start the aircraft. You'll see how simple it is for the startup procedure. Pressurization panel is next. We want to check and make sure that the manual dump switch is in the auto position right here, which is down. The forward outflow knob is fully counterclockwise. This is the forward outflow knob, so you can use your mouse wheel, spin your mouse wheel up and down, and it moves it. Spin it all the way down to the closed position. That's fully counterclockwise. For those of you who don't know, clockwise is this way. Counterclockwise is this way. Okay, who's insulted now? Get over it. Alright, fault is not illuminated. I don't see fault illuminated anywhere. I don't even know where it would be illuminated. And what's next? We need to set the landing altitude of our destination airport. Okay, and we do that with this little knob over here. And in order to do that, what I need is the altitude for KACV, which is where we're flying to. and it just so happens that the altitude is 222 feet. I know this because I'm a genius. So we need to scroll this. Right now it's at 499 feet. I need to get as close as I can to 222. Well, there's 124, there's 249. That works just fine for me. Now, if we had to return immediately, let's say there's a huge difference between our current altitude and the landing altitude. Let's say we're taking off in Denver and we're landing in LA. Okay, no big deal, because there's a 10-minute memory within the pressurization system. So when we take off, we don't have to have the altitude of the current airport set. It'll remember it for 10 minutes. So if it's been beyond 10 minutes, then we got to reset it. Good to know. What's next? Exterior lights are as required. We've already got those all set up. So we're going to go there, and that brings us over here to panel number 4. Emergency lights need to be armed. Right now, they're in the off position. One left click arms them. Fasten seatbelts and no smoking signs should come on at this point. So that tells you we would be doing these originating checks right as or just before passengers start boarding the aircraft. Let's see. We need to test the cautionary and the caution advisories and the Christmas tree. All right. So the way we do that is, come on, brain, work. Let me look at the little thing on here. My brain just completely went blank for some reason. We need to test these guys and all of these guys up here. And there's a little switch right here. There it is. I don't know why my brain didn't want it. It's right in front of my face. It's early. Bear with me. So left click, and that tests all of these lights up here. All right. So we make sure all of those illuminate. Everything does as it should. And then when we right click, it's going to illuminate the entire Christmas tree here and set off the bell, which it does. So we're good to go. I don't know why I couldn't see the switch there, especially since I just did this like 2 hours ago. Let's see. Next, pack switches need to be on auto. Here's the pack switches. That one's on auto. And that one's on auto. Recirc switch needs to be on. That's the recirculation switch, which is this one. And right now it's off, so we turn that on. Bleed 1 and 2 both need to be off. They are. That's these two right here, bleed 1 and bleed 2. And the bleed flow controller needs to be on minimum, which it is. AC generator switches need to be on. That's this guy up here. Generator 1 and 2 are on. And the AC external power needs to be off, which it is. And I just actually flipped the generators off because I'm an idiot. That's on, up is off, and then the external power needs to be off, which it is. Now we need to hop over to the captain's side panel here. And this is actually a bit of a pain, the way we got to do this over here. First thing we do is we check the ground proximity warning flaps override to make sure it's in normal. Well, it doesn't say normal, it just says what it is. So, but if you click on it, it illuminates. So I'm assuming non-illuminated is normal. Now here's where this gets a little bit difficult. We got to try and find an area where we can view a couple of things here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find this sort of sweet spot, if you will. We'll go up just a little bit higher here. Alright, you're going to see why I just did that here in a second. Because we got to deal with these switches, but we got to look for information on these 3 screens. So in the real aircraft, it's not a big deal. You can flip the switch and look right at the screens, but obviously in one of these aircraft, that can be a bit of a pain. Alright, so the first thing is the ADC 1 and 2 test needs to be performed. You're going to push and hold the ADC test switch in either the 1 or 2 position, but here's the thing, we're looking for some information over here. So here's the ADC test switch, 1 and 2. So you left click for 1 and you right click for 2 and you hold it. But we're going to look on here for the altimeter to read 14,360 feet. The barometric pressure setting will read 29 or 23. You can see it reads 29 or 9 or 2 right now. The airspeed will read 285 with the VMO tape reading 284. And then the saturation temperature, which is all the way over here, sat temperature will indicate minus 15 degrees Celsius. WTG2 fail /1 fail appears on the ED. Indicated airspeed mismatch and altitude appear on the primary flight displays. Pitch, trim, elevator, fuel, and avionics caution illuminate. Overspeed warning horn activates. All of that from this little test right here. So we're going to go through and make sure we can see as much as we can of it. So I'm going to left click. Okay, and you can see the airspeed tape says 285. We've got 14,360 feet on our altitude there, 2923 on our barometric pressure. Let's see what else. If you look in the middle there, you can just barely see. You might not be able to see it, but it does say saturation temperature is -15. Indicated airspeed mismatch on the top of the primary flight display. Basically, everything is as it should be, right? That's a lot of information to take in. And if you haven't noticed, we're already like 30-something minutes into this video, and we still got a ways to go. You can see why I'm doing this separately from all of those flights and why that flight took so long. Okay, right-click, same test, but it's different information. Now, here's the interesting thing. My little flowchart here doesn't tell me that what the information will be when you test the other side. Doesn't say, but you can see it's clearly different information. So, nonetheless, seems to be working just fine, so we can move on. Stall warning test needs to be performed. Release stall test 1 and 2. The stall warning test is right here. Hold it. There you go. That's the stick shaker. That was test 1. Left click, right click for test 2. Hold it. And there we go. We're good to go on that. Nose wheel steering switch needs to be off. Right now it is off. So we're good to go on that. Now we're going to move over here to the glare shield. All kinds of hopping around, right? Flight and taxi switch needs to be in the taxi position. That's this guy right here. Move that to taxi. Check your clock. 16:08. That's probably right. Not that worried about the clock right now. Powered flight control shutoffs. Check that none are illuminated and the switch lights are in the out position. Yeah. Which one is it talking about? That's ground proximity. Wait, I missed something here. I must be a moron. Powered flight control shutoffs. Check none illuminated, and the switch lights are in the out position. Well, I don't see anything illuminated. That shouldn't be, right? I think it's supposed to be these. Oh, that's right there in front of my face. Again. Powered flight controls. Okay, so all of these should be non-illuminated and in the out position. There we go. Learning has occurred, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, flight guidance control panel. The HSI select needs to be set to the pilot's flying side. So the pilot that's flying, that's where the arrow needs to be pointing. We're going to be flying from this side, so that's where the arrow is pointing. Yaw damper needs to come on. And the nav source selection knob is as required. Now we're going to be using FMS1 as our nav source. You can see right now it shows the VOR here. If you change this, there's FMS1 in magenta. There's NAV1 in light blue. NAV2 in yellow, and then FMS2 again in magenta. So you need to actually look at it. It says FMS2. You need to scroll it over. We're going to be using FMS1, and that takes care of that. Alright, moving on to instrument panels. It's about time to set our V-speeds. So the V-speeds are a little bit interesting, and I'm actually going to take a moment here. I'm going to pause for just a second so I can pull it up, and I'm going to show you the speed card that we use to do our to set our V-speeds, so that you can see where I'm getting the information from, and then I'll show you how to set them. So give me just a second to find that, and we'll press on. Alright, so obviously, as the title says here, this is the Q400 Takeoff speeds card. Whole bunch of information on here. It can be a little overwhelming if you don't know what you're looking at, so we're going to go through it real quick and just make sure you understand what it is here. So a couple things. I'm not going to read through all of this. We're not worried about it all right now. Just keep in mind, if you're using icing protection, or you have wet runways or tailwinds, things like that, this information is important for that. That being said, as far as V1 is concerned, you're going to assume that V1 and V-rotate are the same. If your rotation speed is higher than your V2 speed, then your rotation speed and your V2 speed are the same. Easy enough, right? Okay, we're not going to do this one yet. This is flap retraction speed. I want to take care of our V speeds first. Now, if our temperature is at or below 20 degrees Celsius, we're going to use this side. If it's at or above 20 degrees Celsius, we're going to use this side for a flaps 5 takeoff. If we're doing a flaps 10 takeoff, we go down here, flaps 15 and so on. We're going to be doing a flaps 5 takeoff. We are at or below 20 degrees Celsius, if I remember correctly. And even if we're not, I can re-pull the information, because I'm just going to move this to the other screen when I'm done explaining this. So for the moment, let's just assume we're at or below 20 degrees Celsius. When we get back in the aircraft, we'll check and verify. Okay, so we need our weight first. What weight are we using first of all? We're using our takeoff weight. Okay, So our weight and then our altitude. Well, we know we're in LA, so our altitude is it's in 2,000 block increments, right? So we're not gonna go between these, but we will go between these. That didn't make any sense. You'll see here in a minute. So we're just gonna go with 0 as our altitude, and we need our takeoff weight. Where do we get our takeoff weight from? Wait for it. There it is right there. Takeoff mass is 27,672 kilograms. Now, notice I said kilograms. Remember, I'm doing this in metric. If you are using imperial and that control panel has all your weight in pounds, you need a different card. There's a card that's identical to this except everything's in pounds. Keep that in mind. Okay, so our takeoff weight is 27,672 pounds. Well, the problem is this goes 26, 28, 29. So it's somewhere between 28 and 29. It's somewhere between 26 and 28. Because it's 27,672. But it's pretty close to right in between. So we're just going to correlate between the two of them. So the difference between, now this is V rotate and this is V2. See that? VR/V2, VR/V2. Alright, so the difference between VR at 26,000 and 28,000 is 6 knots. So we're going to just add 3 knots. And we could say, you know what, it's even closer to 28,000 because it's 27,672. So we could add 4 knots. So let's say 128, and I'm going to write these down over here. VR is going to be 128 knots, and V2, we do the same thing. So from 127 to 132 is a difference of 5 knots. So let's just add 3 to that. Okay, that's going to put us at 130. So V2 is 130 knots, and our V1 is going to be the same as V rotate. All right, now let's go up here. We're using flaps 5. VFRI is the flap retraction. I forget what the I stands for. Indication or something. Anyway, it's our flap retraction speed. Same thing, we're going between 26 and 28 here. So the difference between the two, 5 knots, 137 and 142 is 5 knots. We're just going to add 3 to that. It gives us 140 knots for our V fry. Okay, 140. And then, wait, there's one more. We need our V climb speed as well. So the difference in V climb is 6. Again, we're a little closer to 28,000 than 26. So let's add 4 to this, which is going to make this 152. So our V climb is 152 knots. Now that we've got all those speeds, we'll hop back over in the aircraft really quick, and I'll show you how and where to input those. Alright, so back here in the aircraft, first thing I want to do is just verify we're at plus 17 degrees Celsius, and I know it's hard to see that on YouTube sometimes, so there it is, plus 17 degrees Celsius. So we were correct in using our at or below 20 degrees Celsius outside air temperature, so we're good on that. So now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and enter these V speeds. And the way we're going to do this, and I'm going to slide down over here so you can see it a little bit better. We're going to use this guy right here and this guy right here. Alright, so when we hit the select button, you see V1, V rotate, and V2 show up. Whichever one is highlighted, I just scroll this knob right here using the mouse wheel, and it's going to change the setting on that one. Now, the key is I hit it once to go to V1, another to go to VR, and another to go to V2, and then for our V fry and V climb, I hit it again, and you got these two that you didn't even notice were there. So starting with V1, we said V1 is going to be 128 knots. So click on select, scroll the wheel until we get to 128 knots. And there's 128 there. Hit select again and it goes to VR, and that's going to be 130 knots. If you don't start scrolling the wheel relatively soon, it'll turn itself off and you'll just hit the select button again. No big deal. You'll see it do that here in a second. So there's V rotate at 130. And then, I'm sorry, I messed up. You guys are supposed to catch me on that. V1 and V rotate are the same at 128. So let's go back here and bring that down to, okay. Oh, that's barometric pressure. Duh. Okay, 128 for V1 and 128 for rotate, and then V2 is 130 knots. Remember, V1 and V rotate are the same. So 130 knots here, then we click it again, and V-fry we said is going to be 140 knots. So this is V-fry or V-flap retraction speed. I forget what the I actually stands for. There's 140, and then our climb speed is 152, and that's this last one down here. So we scroll that one on up, and there we go, 152, and then we just leave it be, and it'll unhighlight here in a second. And once it's not highlighted, I can scroll this all I want. It doesn't do anything. You have to have them highlighted for them to work. Good stuff. All right, so that's how we set our V speeds in the Q400. So let's move on now. Let's see. Pitot-static isolation switch is normal. It hides below the PFD. That's the primary flight display. And that's this guy right here. And it's a normal. You can see it says norm on there for normal. So we're good on that. Integrated standby instrument check. Set altimeter and verify no flags. That's this guy right here. Okay, and I think I did. Yeah, actually I did. 3020 is the altimeter for us right now. So we can scroll this guy up to 3020, which is some pretty high pressure actually. Okay. And then we're done with that. Landing gear lever, we want to check that it's down. We've already done that once before, but we're good now. Ground proximity warning, landing selector needs to be checked. Switch to the emergency return flap setting to be expected. Let's see. Is that one of these? No, it's supposed to be this one right here. But the ground proximity warning, landing selector. I must be missing something here again. I'm kind of an idiot sometimes. That's the test. Glide slope warning, inhibit. Yeah. Maybe it's in the middle here. I don't know every single thing on the planet, folks. Just most of it. Okay. Come on, that was kind of funny, right? No, the only thing I'm seeing on my little thing right here is that we need to set this flap setting. So if we do a return, it's going to be at flaps 15, because that's also going to be what we're landing at. There must be another button here that I'm just not seeing for some reason. And now I'm not going to say that it's not simulated, because this thing's pretty much got everything simulated. So obviously I'm missing something. If you happen to know where that is, throw it down in the comments. But otherwise, we're going to move on for now so that we don't take too long. Hydraulic control panel needs to be checked. We want to make sure the switches aren't depressed, and cross-check the systems panel to ensure adequate hydraulic quantity. So our hydraulic standby hydraulics, and our hydraulic isolation valve, and our hydraulic pressure over here. And I don't know how we're going to check and make sure we have enough quantity when nothing's running right now, right? This is where not actually being a pilot in this aircraft really starts to show, because I don't actually know what it's asking me to do here. I don't fully understand what it's asking me to do. So all I know is that standby hydraulic pressure, PTU control, and the isolation valve are all off, which they should be. It says that the switches shouldn't be depressed, but there's no hydraulic pressure other than the parking brake, because we don't have the hydraulics running. So I don't really understand that. Either way, the AHRS panel needs to be checked. That's this right here, just the top of it right here. And all it says is check that nothing is illuminated, and that the pitch and roll disconnect handles are in. So it's this guy and then these two right here. And if they're in the off position, then they're in. So they are. Good on that. All right. Still in the center pedestal right here. Excuse me for the sniffles. The fuel control panel needs to be checked. Okay, it's checked. I don't know what you want me to do with it. Ensure, oh, it tells me right here. Maybe I should read before I open my mouth. Ensure that both tank auxiliary pump switches are off. If they were on, they would be highlighted. And ensure that the transfer switch is centered, which it is. So we're good on that. Propeller control needs to be checked. We need to make sure that the auto feather switch is off, and the alternate auto feather switches are off. So this one off, and then both of these off, and they would be lit up if they were on. So they're definitely off. And almost done. All right, I'm gonna sniffle here. Excuse me. Oh, I've had a nasty cold lately. It's driving me nuts. All right, let's back up a little bit here, because we're about to do the auto feather test. This is all kinds of fun here. You guys will love this. Okay. I'm really sorry for the sniffles. All right, the auto feather test. It tests the logic of the auto feather system, and we need to follow this following procedure. We need to make sure that the power levers, that's these guys, are in the disconnect position, which they are. We're going to turn on the auto feather switch by just pushing the button right here, which we'll do here in a second. But here's what we're looking for, and it's all going to be up on here. AF test in progress will be displayed. I think it shows up right here, or maybe up here. Up trim appears. I have never seen the up trim, so I'm not really sure what the deal is there. ITT and NH red dials increase. So the NH is this one right here, and the ITT is this one here, and the red dials, I guess the red mark should move. I haven't really noticed, but I've been trying to read and look at the same time. It doesn't work for me. And then once it's all done, it'll say that the auto feather test has been passed, and then we turn the auto feather switch off. That's what we're doing here. So let's press it. There's the test in progress. And we're watching and we're waiting, and there's nothing else to do. There's the AF arm. Up trim, there it is. Looking for the increase. It looks like the NH is increased, but I don't know about the ITT. But hey, whatever. Just waiting for it to wrap up here. There's nothing else to do except sit here and stare at the thing. I know it's not particularly exciting, but you got to go through the test. So it looked like a little change right there, right? Or was that just me? Well, maybe it's just me. Either way, it says test passed, so we're good to go. Click the button again, and we're done with that. All right, moving on. Power quadrant. This is the power quadrant. Emergency brake as required. It needs to be on right now because we're parked, and we want to check and make sure that we have at least 500 psi before starting the engines in the brake hydraulics. I'm going to just pop this up instead of flying all over the place. Parking brake hydraulics are right here. These are times 1,000, so 1, 2, 3, 4. 4,000 psi. We're at 2,500. We only need 5. We're good. All right, moving on. Control lock needs to be engaged. That's this one right here. So that's disengaged. That's get back up there. That's engaged. Power levers in the disconnect. I'm assuming it means disconnect. It's DISC. So disconnect most likely. Condition levers in fuel off, which is these two down here, and they are. The ARC-DO. I don't know what ARC-DO stands for, but it is the radios, so we need to set the radios for departure. And that is going to be these guys over here, and they're not quite turned on yet. So right-click each of them, that turns them on. Default announcements start at this point. And we're not using ATC, so we don't have to actually change anything on these. But I did learn something yesterday, and in case I forget to explain it later, to turn on the traffic collision avoidance system, you click this button once, go to expanded, that brings up, this is the TCAS page, and then you hold this button down for at least 2 seconds, and that will move this from standby to TARA. If you just click on it, it doesn't do anything. I'm clicking on it right now, it does nothing. So just something to keep in mind. Alright, let's move on. Trims need to be tested. This is actually a pain in the butt. I'm not going to go through the whole thing on here because it's already really long. But basically what you do is you trim the aircraft all the way up, all the way down. So you got to watch this thing right here and listen for this chirping sound. So there you go, there's the chirping sound. But you have to go through the full range of motion of the trims, all the way nose down, all the way nose up, and then full aileron trim, full rudder trim. And it takes a while. We're not going to do that right now. But that's what you do during these originating flows. So just keep that in mind. It's a simulator, but it does simulate failures. So you may want to keep an eye on that. And then the IFAS control panel needs to be set as required, which it is. It says on here what they did is they set the captain's screen to the doors. So what you could do if you wanted, you could go here, right click this once to systems. That changes this panel or this screen here to systems, and then click on doors, and now you can see if all your doors are closed. You see it did it to both of them right now. It's kind of a pain, but you got to go back and forth to get one or the other on something else. But we're gonna put that back on nav. We're gonna take this one here and put it back on all systems. Yep, that's the one we want there, and we're good to go. Let's see what else. So we got the IFAS control panel where we want it. I'm good to go with that, and that means, believe it or not, we are actually done with the captain's originating checks. That was a long process, wasn't it? Next, we're going to do the first officer's originating checks. Alright, so technically we're on the proper side of the aircraft now. Since we are a first officer, we belong on the right side of the aircraft. But now we're going to go through the first officer's originating flows, or first officer's originating checks, and that is going to wrap up this tutorial. And the good news is Captain actually has the bulk of the originating checks, which makes sense. He's responsible for the flight ultimately. But we do have a few things to go through here. So, first things first. First officer's job is to copy the ATIS. That's the Automated Terminal Information Service, which gives you the weather information. So, for our flight sim here, at least for me, what I would do is I would actually pull up my Active Sky 2012 right here, and this would give me my weather information. For example, right now our wind is 0106 knots, 10 statute miles visibility, clear below 20,000, no precipitation. There's our temperature, there's our dew point, there's our barometric pressure setting. The way you get it from, this is the way they would read it to you. And if you get a text version, it would be like this METAR down here, which says all the same stuff as this. And I know how to read it, but I've done that before and I'm not going to go through it again. This is the same as this. This is a translation up here. So there we go. There's our weather. We've copied our ATIS and we're good to go. Now we want to check our oxygen masks, which are actually down over here. Let's go down. Flying, flying. All right, there we go. All right. This is de-icing pressure here. This is for our oxygen mask. Here we got plenty of oxygen, so we're good on that. We got to check our circuit breakers and make sure they're in. That's right. And even though we did it as part of the captain's flows, the captain normally wouldn't do the first officer's side. That's the first officer's job. So there's all our circuit breakers. They're all in and they're all good to go, and we're very happy with that. Let's see what else. I was just looking at it. How did I miss it? Ensure that, FO side panel, ensure that the forward outflow valve is guarded and closed. That's what I was thinking of, and that's this guy right here. Forward outflow valve. I believe that's forward outflow valve. It's the only thing that's guarded. Yeah, forward outflow valve. Guarded and closed. Good. FO glare shield. Hop up here. This is our glare shield on this side here. We need to test the anti-skid and then turn it on. This is the anti-skid, so one left click turns it on. If we want to test it, we got to hold it up. There it is. It's good to go. We can turn that off now. We leave it in the on position, and we're good. Let's see. Oh, there's a couple lights that pop on up here when you do that as well, but it's really hard to hold that button with the mouse, or hold that switch with the mouse button, and look up there at the same time. Doesn't work very well, does it? Okay, ground proximity warning system needs to be tested, and that is this one, right? Yep. Okay, so here's the thing. If you push and hold this button for a few seconds, you're going to get a really long test that lasts like 5 minutes, literally. Or you can just click it once, click and release, and you get a short test. We're going to do the short test.
Glide slope. Pull up. Terrain. Terrain. Pull up.
And we're done. Next, we're going to set our flight instruments. We would set our V-speeds and barometric pressure and all that. We don't need to do any of that because it's already been done. You can see it linked up from both sides. So we're good there. Over here, we want to check the AHRS. I still don't know what that stands for. So if you know what AHRS stands for, let me know. We'll check it. We'll make sure nothing's illuminated. We're good. Terrain and weather mode as desired. I believe we're in terrain mode, but I'm not going to mess with it for the moment because we're about to test the weather radar. So what we need to do is we need to change this to nav. Alright, so if we come down here, left click one, change it to nav. Now it's on the nav display. See this little the angled box here? That means we're in terrain mode, and of course you can see the terrain anyway. So right here we click to weather mode. Now we're good to go there, and we're ready to go ahead and test our weather radar. And we do that by coming down here. This is the weather radar right here. Let me move over a little so you can see. The little dot tells us it's off, standby, and then test. So now it's in the test mode. Give it a second, you'll start seeing a bunch of pretty colors pop up on there. There's the pretty colors. We're good on that. So while that's going through its test, we can go ahead and we can take care of our TCAS test as well. So we click on, oh yeah, duh. complete brain fart here. I'm having a good time. Okay, so technically, let me just move these up out of the way here. So we are already on the TCAS page. I showed you how to get there, but I'll show you again. From this page, click here. The bottom right line select key, expanded, and that brings us here. And then this is how we test it right here. Just click on test. You can see it's going through its test up there, and then when it's done, it's going to tell us that it's done and that it passed or failed.
TCAS system, test OK.
There we go. Test OK, so we're good on that. I was looking at my little flows thing over here, and for some reason my brain went blank. I thought, where do I do that at? Oh yeah, that's where I do it at. Alright, so that brings us to the FMS initialization. This guy right here. Or not the initialization, but the flight planning. The initialization is done. So next is the flight planning, and we're not doing that in this tutorial. We're done. Last thing I want to say, I think I've mentioned it before. No, I haven't mentioned it before. Everybody knows that I hate the aircraft being forward of the parking space here. However, when you push Shift P, your standard pushback function for FSX, your default pushback, it initiates a pushback procedure in this aircraft with like ground crew and stuff like that. That takes a second to turn off, so you can't just move it a few feet without kind of making a mockery or a mess of things. So I just leave it alone. It sits where it sits. And that's pretty much it. So I know it's a long video, but you can see there's a lot of information there. But that covers all the power up for the aircraft, the captain's originating checks, the first officer's originating checks, and then from this point here, with the APU running, we are ready to put in a flight plan, start up our aircraft, and head on through the airways there. In order to not do that at the start of every single video I make with this aircraft, there is your cold and dark tutorial. There is your originating flows. From now on, all you will see is the inputting of information into the FMS and then the starting of the engines. All of this will be done before we start recording. I hope that this gives you guys all the information you're looking for. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them down in the comments. I'd be more than happy to answer them to the best of my ability. Keep in mind, I am not a de Havilland Dash 8 Q400 pilot. I've never flown one of these in the real world. I'm only going off what I've learned from the information provided by Majestic and de Havilland. So, yeah, that about sums it up. If you haven't had an opportunity yet, please click the subscribe button down there. The more subscribers I get, the more excited I get because it makes me feel good about me. Alright, that was kind of funny. Alright guys, I'm out of here. Have a great day. Keep the blue side up unless otherwise instructed by ATC.